This is a National Geographic virtual field trip. Are you ready to dive in? Today, we're exploring the ocean. From the Atlantic to the Pacific to the coastline of the Sunshine State. Jump on in, the water's fine. Welcome to National Geographic headquarters in Washington, D.C. My name is Krista Strahan, and I am your tour guide on this virtual field trip. Every year, I look forward to April 22nd because that's Earth Day. Do you know why we celebrate Earth Day every year? Well, it started in 1970 by people who were concerned about the state of our planet and wanted to raise awareness about environmental issues. Every year since, people all over the world gather, celebrate, volunteer, and work to protect our environment. Today, we're focusing on one of Earth's most critical ecosystems, the ocean, which makes up more than 70% of our planet. Scientists estimate 50 to 80% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. Today, we're going below the surface and behind the scenes. For our first stop, we'll join photographer and explorer Brian Scarry at the New Bedford Whaling Museum in New Bedford, Massachusetts. So let's get going.
I'm Brian Scarry, and I am a National Geographic wildlife photographer. Over the last 3 years, I've been working on my most ambitious project ever, Secrets of the Whales. This was a story that I created to really dive into the lives of whales. Some of the latest science is showing that whales have extremely complex lives, more complex than we ever thought. Whales have emotions and personality, they have complex families, and they do all kinds of things from babysitting to singing competitions to preferring their own special foods depending where in the world they live. Today, I am going to take you on an adventure. Here today at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, we're going to talk a little bit about whales, the history of whales with humans, and about what I learned throughout my work. So, what is whaling? Whaling is the killing of whales for commercial purposes, and that goes back hundreds of years. In the United States, the commercial whaling industry really sort of hit its peak in the mid-1800s. Two of the most popular species that they were hunting were the sperm whale and the right whale. And the reason that they were hunting whales was for the whale oil. When they caught whales or killed whales, they used a variety of tools to do that. And they would kill these giant whales, and then they would use special tools to cut off the blubber. Whales, as mammals that live in the ocean, have very thick layers of fat, of blubber, that keeps them warm. That blubber, when it's burned and melted down in these giant pots, it produces an oil. The oil was used for lamps. That was what was burned to give us light. When whaling was in its heyday, we didn't know what we know today about whales. We didn't know that they are really smart, highly cognitive animals with families and personalities. The eventuality was that by the later 1800s, the whaling industry began to die down because we discovered oil in the ground. It wasn't, though, until 1972 in the United States when the Marine Mammal Protection Act was created, which made it illegal to kill whales or any marine mammals. I spend most of my days and my life out on the ocean and trying to photograph whales and other animals. And today we're in a museum. But both are equally as important if we're trying to understand the story of whales. Photography is about being very patient and very quiet and hoping that the whales let you into their world. Whales are not so different than humans. They have these rich ancestral traditions that they pass on from one generation to the next. Once you understand that the ocean or our planet has these animals on it that are doing things in many ways like us, like humans, you can't unknow that. No longer are we above the animals or apart from them, but we are intricately connected to them.
Welcome back. I just can't believe the whale behavior that Brian was able to see firsthand. Today, we're so lucky because Brian is here to answer our questions. Welcome, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great, Krista. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, my pleasure. Great to be here.
Okay, Brian, our first student-submitted question is from Brinkley Middle School in Jackson, Mississippi. The students there want to know, how deep can whales swim?
Oh, my goodness, that's a great question. Well, the truth of the matter is they can go down thousands of meters. You know, some of the deepest diving animals on the planet are actually beaked whales. Sperm whales, which we talk about in the series, are very deep divers too, going down thousands of feet deep into the darkness of the cold ocean to search for food, for squid. But the deepest diving whales are these beaked whales, which look a little bit like a dolphin. They're kind of like a very long, elongated dolphin with a beak, and they are, of course, whales. Dolphins are whales too. They're just smaller whales. But you know, I should know off the sort of top of my head exactly how deep they go, but I'm not going to venture to say that because I could be wrong. But I can say that some of those animals, like Blainville's beaked whales or Cuvier beaked whales, are some of the deepest divers, and they might even go down, you know, a mile or more. But I think we'll have to look that up and be exact. But that's a fact that they are the deepest diving animals on the planet.
Here's a question from the students at Memorial Middle School in Conyers, Georgia. They want to know, is it scary to take pictures of a whale since they're so big?
Yeah, you know, that's a good realization of what it's like to be underwater. You know, I think whenever you go into the water, whenever I go into the water, I'm aware that I'm in an alien environment. I'm in a place where we love to go as humans, but we're not as comfortable, certainly, as the animals that live there. So we need sort of life support equipment or thermal protection, things like that. When you're in the company of giant animals like a whale, it is certainly intimidating. It takes your breath away to be in the presence of a 40 or 50-foot long animal, you know, bigger than a school bus, and, you know, something that might weigh 70 tons. But that being said, my experience with whales is that they are very gentle. And because they are so smart, because they have these big brains, they're very aware of us being in the water. They know that I'm there. I'm never going to sneak up on a whale. So, and because of that, they tend to be very polite. So if a whale is swimming past me, even if I'm not paying attention, which I always try to do, you know, they might lift their pectoral fin or move their tail. Now, it's very incumbent upon me to be vigilant. I'm always looking around and making sure that an accident doesn't happen. It's very possible that a whale could whack you with its tail or its pectoral fin and not do it on purpose. So you have to be careful. It is a little bit scary, but generally the beauty and the sort of awe that you feel overwhelms any fear that you might have.
So one student from Hickory Middle School who loves photography wonders how you got your start in photography and what things help you set up an image so that it tells a great story.
Well, you know, the sort of shorter version of the answer would be that I fell in love with the sea as a child, as a little boy. I didn't grow up on the ocean, but living in Massachusetts, my parents would take me to the beaches of Cape Cod and Rhode Island and New Hampshire. And I can remember going home at the end of the day and just, being so excited about what I saw, sunburned and salty, but just loving everything about the ocean. So when I was about 15 years old, I started scuba diving. And then it was maybe a year or two after that I discovered photography, that I figured out that using a camera as a tool was the way that I wanted to explore the ocean. But it was a very lofty dream. I didn't know anybody who was a photographer. I got proficient at diving. I did a lot of scuba diving. I became comfortable in the water. I ultimately went to college and studied photography and photojournalism and filmmaking and all kinds of animation, everything visual arts. But then when I got out of school, I couldn't just hang a sign on the door that said I was an underwater photographer. I had to go out and make that career. So I worked at other jobs to pay the bills and to buy camera equipment, and then would go out on weekends or vacations, and I would photograph, animals close to home. Eventually, over time, I started to get assignments from diving magazines and selling photos to other types of magazines, newspapers. And then eventually, I got that first assignment with National Geographic, and that came about because I had become friends with a veteran underwater photographer who worked at National Geographic. And he called me one day and said he had two assignments, one that he wanted to do and one that he wasn't so excited about doing. And he recommended me for the one that, he wasn't so keen on. And it was a tough assignment, but I got it, and it worked well. And 23 years later, now I'm starting my 29th story. So it's been great. But, what I would recommend if somebody's interested in doing this kind of thing, do whatever it takes to become good at photography. Look at the magazines, look at a magazine like National Geographic, try to figure out how the photographer made those pictures, do what I call dissecting the photo, what lens might he have used or she used? Was it a wide angle lens or a macro lens? Where was the sun? Maybe they used artificial lighting. Think about how it was made. And then if you have an opportunity, if you can get a camera and, work in your own backyard where you don't have to travel to the ends of the earth, you can become the best photographer sort of in your region. And you can do what a National Geographic photographer can't do because you have time, you have repeatability, you can get really good at it.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. We certainly appreciate your work. Thanks for joining us and sharing with our students and all of our viewers. And we hope to hear from you again.
Thanks, Chris. It was a real pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I've been in one place for a little too long. All right, how about we do the wave? Now, whether you stand up or stay in your seats, I want everyone to do this. And just because I can't see you doesn't mean you shouldn't participate. If I only had some music. Ah, nice. Okay, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Woo! Okay, now we know what we're doing now. We're gonna do it one more time. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Woo! All right, that's so much better. So now you've learned more about whale history and culture, and you're a little loosened up. So let's see what you're thinking with a few questions. Here's our first question. Now this one's just for fun. What is a trait or behavior that both whales and humans have that most surprised you? A, emotions. B, singing competitions. C, babysitting. Or D, living in families. Scientists are learning that whales have extremely complex lives and ways of communicating, and behave in ways that seem very similar to how humans behave. Now, for our next question. What ultimately led to whaling becoming illegal in the United States? Was it A, the invention of the light bulb? B, the discovery of oil in the ground in the late 1800s. C, this is a trick question and it's still legal. Or D, citizens protested and Congress passed a protection law in 1972. Based on what we learned from Brian earlier, the answer is D. Although oil was discovered in the ground in the late 1800s, giving people an alternative to oil from whales, it wasn't until 100 years later when it actually became illegal to hunt whales. People worked together and used their civic powers to pressure the United States government to pass the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972, which made whaling and the hunting of other marine mammals illegal in the United States. Okay, our final question in the whale category. And there's no wrong answers here. I'm just curious. Would you want to photograph a whale underwater that was bigger than a school bus and weighed over 70 tons? You can answer A, yes, I'm ready to start diving with Brian. B, maybe now that I know how polite whales are and I'm less scared. Or C, I'd rather take action from land. I'm actually thrilled that we have answers across the board here because we need everyone's help in all possible ways. So where do you all think we're going next? I'll give you a hint. It's warmer than where we just were. It's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and Charles Darwin may have spent some time there in 1835. If you guessed the Galapagos, you're right. Our next stop on this virtual field trip is to meet a marine ecologist.
There are so many things about the ocean that are important to me. Not only do I find it an amazing and a beautiful space, but it's a concern of mine. I'm Salome Buglas. I'm an ecologist at the Charles Darwin Foundation, and I'm a National Geographic explorer. Doing work on seamounts is fascinating. Seamounts are like underwater mountains that rise from the seabed. They can be anywhere from 100 to thousands of meters tall. And these are uncharted seamounts that have never been surveyed before, partly because they go beyond the limits of scuba diving. This ROV, remotely operated vehicle, is a little robot that is on a very long string, which is called a tether. And on this tether cord, it sends back all the information. I was really interested in finding out what ecosystems are down here, how do they change with depth, and be able to describe them and characterize them for the first time. They think there's over 100,000 seamounts in the world, and we've studied less than 300. Here in the Galapagos Marine Reserve, we think we have over 300 seamounts. We've studied in detail 4. They're a prominent feature in this space because we are on a volcanic archipelago. We know that they're very important for fishing. There are sites that are likely important for hosting lots of fisheries. I was interested in studying these not just because these are ecosystems that we know very little about, but they're really ecosystems that provide ecosystem services to us and possibly to others. The project is exploring and surveying shallow seamounts, so the exploring always comes first, and then we can hope that we can survey. We should measure the entire thing and say up until where the leaves got cut. There is literally an entire world out there that still needs exploring. As the famous quote says, we know more about our close space than we know about the ocean. Oh, is that sponge? Okay, there is more. It feels great to be an explorer that is part of the mission to get to understand our marine ecosystems better.
have always wanted to travel to the Galapagos. As a special treat, Salome is here with us to answer some of our questions. Hi, Salome.
Hi, Krista.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
So, Salome, because the Galapagos are so remote, I know there are many species there that are endemic, which means they exist nowhere else. Which of these species is your favorite?
Ooh. There's so many to pick from. I love the flightless cormorant. It's it's the only cormorant in the world that its wings just became useless, and it's an epic diver. I've had the chance to snorkel and see it catch an octopus, and it's so hard to film because they're so fast. They're pretty amazing.
Fantastic. All right, so students at Memorial Middle School in Conyers, Georgia, want to know who designed your ROV and what are the features of your ROV? Now I feel like it's a pop quiz.
So the ROV that we used was designed by a team based in Philadelphia. They're called VideoRay, and they're an amazing bunch of engineers who I contacted them to see if they wanted to help me explore some shallow seamounts in the Galapagos. And they were like, we're there, you tell us when we'll come. And I had a team of 8 engineers, and they brought 2 of their ROVs. And what's great about their ROVs is that they have, even though they're small, they have this manipulating or this robotic arm you can manipulate. And we were able to grab some samples. So it was just great to have an ROV that is small, like the size of a microwave, but can go down to 200 meters deep and grab things that we've never seen before.
In your opinion, how can students be ocean advocates?
Oh, I think I think falling in love with something makes it very easy to defend it, stand up for it, and inform yourself. So I would say if you think you're interested in the ocean, get to engage with it more, go underwater, put on a wetsuit. I do it here in Canada. I put on a thick wetsuit and I swim between the kelp, and it just makes me want to study everything that's down there. And I've decided to no longer eat many groups of fish because it's part of the more you know, the more you realize that you want to inform yourself. So any kid out there, I think, who wants to be an advocate for the ocean, I would say build a connection and see what inspires you. And I think we don't need to advocate for everything, but pick that one thing that you like.
Well, that's fantastic. We have lots of students watching. We have lots of teachers watching. And it's a great thing to share and tell everyone, go out there, be in the water, and get inspired. Thank you so much, Salome. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Are you all ready to answer a few more questions? Here's your first question. True or false? The Galapagos Islands are a volcanic archipelago. The correct answer is indeed true, that the Galapagos Islands are a volcanic archipelago. That means that each of the major islands of the Galapagos is made up of a single big volcano, except for the Big Island. Okay, next question. How many seamounts are thought to be in the Galapagos Marine Reserve? A, less than 50, B, around 100, C, 226, or D, over 300? The correct answer is D, over 300. This is why Salome's work is so exciting. There's still so much we don't know. Time for your final question. What percent of the ocean remains unexplored? Is it A, 50%, B, less than 25%, C, more than 80%, or D, 5%? The answer is C. More than 80% of our ocean has never been mapped, explored, or even seen by humans. Ocean exploration is challenging, but as technology improves, so does our understanding of it. Now, our next explorer can actually do her work anywhere she has Wi-Fi and her computer. Let's meet eco-journalist Shruti Gurudev, one of National Geographic's young explorers.
I'm Shruti Gurudev, I'm 22, and I'm a National Geographic Young Explorer. By day, I'm a financial examiner, and by night, I'm an ocean conservationist. My magazine came from this feeling that I had diving beneath the Great Barrier Reef. I saw a lot of coral bleaching, and it made me very sad because all of the corals had turned this bright white color. I spent an hour down there, and it had changed my worldview completely. So I was like, if an hour can change me and impact me in such a significant way, then I should probably express that to other people. So I decided to create an e-magazine taking my love for writing, but also my love for the ocean, and putting that together to involve youth and have them write articles, submit photography and art so we could make a publication.
Hey Allison, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Journalism is a bridge between art and science. An Hour in the Deep magazine is solutions focused. We are very forward-looking. There's not one singular definition of what an ocean conservationist or what an ocean steward is. If any of you have seen the movie Ratatouille, when he says anyone can cook, it's the same way. Anyone can be a conservationist. You just have to find your niche, and whatever that niche is, play to your strengths.
Wow, what an inspiration. Today has really made me realize how much we're still learning about our ocean. You want to know what else I learned? Even though I don't live next to the ocean, I can still care deeply for it and the creatures that live there. We can all be advocates for our ocean. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm Krista Strahan. See you next time.